Hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, my friends, I'm not sure how many of you heard, but you should have heard, Dr. Cornel West, a professor at Harvard who taught African American studies and philosophy at Harvard, recently resigned from Harvard, from his professorship, citing a deep spiritual rot within the core of Harvard, and this particularly happened after he was denied tenure. Now, Dr. West, for those of you who are not familiar, he is a very passionate expositor of philosophy. He's a public intellectual. He is very left-leaning, which is really not a problem. I don't agree with him on many things, but I have a respect for him because he has integrity and he stands on first principles. Even if I think that his first principles are not correct and his integrity is being exercised in a direction that is fundamentally harmful to humanity as a whole, I still believe that he believes he's doing the right thing. So when I looked at his resignation letter, a few things jumped out at me. Professor West claimed that the spirit of Jim Crow was looming over the Harvard Divinity School and the Harvard faculty with this superficial diversity that they have, trying to make everything, all his classes about African American stuff and twisting it and turning it like that. And also, I'm not saying it as eloquently as he said it, but he mentioned how they were kind of using black identity as a sort of social currency, as a means to push that and seem inclusive. And in his opinion, that's Jim Crow related. And he also mentioned that there is anti-Palestinian sentiment sentiment about the Palestinians, which would go against his sentiment, and he's a very pro-Palestine person. Dr. West is a supporter of boycotts, divestments, and sanctions against the Israeli state. So, when I first saw this, I thought a few things. Number one, West's paradigm is binding him to a particular consideration which may not be reflective of the truth. West sees the world and the West, no pun intended, as a matter of systems, identities, and experiences, lived experiences. He's very much an expositor of standpoint epistemology. He's very much an expositor of a lot of ideas and theories of knowledge which particularly have to do with how one feels in life. He very much has a sort of aversion to certain kinds of normativity, how things are. He's a revolutionary. And so when a revolutionary is impacted by something like this that kind of upends their career or upends their standing in an institution, since they already see the world as a combination of institutions and power structures that oppress people, the revolutionary is going to interpret it just as that. Now, I think that West is correct to point out the spiritual rot and decay within academia, and I'll explain why in a moment, but not because it's anti-Palestinian and not because it's trying to push this soft Jim Crow superficial diversity, although I do believe academia as a whole has catered to the diversity and inclusion and equity class, the industry, because almost every single college, including Harvard, has an Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Equity. So I do believe that is happening, but West is approaching it from a very different lens. Academia, my friends, is a political institution. It is a political institution that rewards its members who are just generally complacent and obedient. Now, West particularly attacks Harvard for not adhering to Veritas, truth. But it's not just Harvard. It's an institution, the entire institution, that West has spent his entire life using as a means to extol his ideas. And how can I prove this? Well, I looked at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences TenYear Process at Harvard, and just looking at the TenYear Process can make you see just how politically charged and rooted certain promotions are. West is concerned about Veritas, the truth, but the truth is not academia itself is not concerned with the truth. It's concerned with the sort of perpetuation of certain hierarchies which are predicated upon intellectual prudishness. So, the TenYear Process for someone in the Faculty of Art and Science at Harvard, that includes every subject from African American Studies to philosophy to hard sciences. Here is the TenYear track. Number one, they go through there's a promotion dossier. So all that means that in the summer, prior to someone wanting to get tenure, they basically give everyone their materials. The professor gives the committee their materials so they can review them for tenure. Then the committee goes ahead and reviews them with tenure, and the committee consults with the divisional dean according to what this says, and then the committee decides, okay, am I going to recommend you for tenure, or am I not going to do that? Then you have to go ahead and get a few external letters, 12 to 15 external letters, with which compare you to scholars in your field and say, hey, this guy's good. Then the department as a whole has a vote on the fate of your tenure. And the department as a whole likes you. You're good to go. Then there are confidential letters, which you have to solicit, and you provide to the dean of the committee. Then there is a case statement, there is a review, and then the president of the university ultimately has the say in ensuring your tenure either falls or it succeeds and transcends its barriers. This is how the tenure process works in the Harvard University Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Why did I just put you through all that? Because you have to understand the structure of how this thing works that West is concerned about is not concerned with truth. It's concerned with politics. If a committee has to recommend you in the first place, then another committee has to recommend and to vote for you, then another individual, the president, has to recommend and put you in. Those individuals are naturally going to consider not only the totality of your scholarship, which should be at the core of their considerations, they're going to consider what would the impacts or implications of you being given tenure be to this institution. How will this reflect on the institution? Okay, do we really like you or not? People are motivated indeed by this kind of self-interest. This is just a natural fact of humanity. And this is what practices like public choice economics show. A lot of us expect people who are in institutions to hold to higher ideas and to kind of forsake their own desires for what is true. But, as public choice economics and other fields of study show us, politicians and professors, and if you want to take the principle a little bit further, have their own motivations, and they will use those motivations at the risk of principle. This is not a bug, but a feature of academia. And when academics get mad at you, sometimes they'll go about destroying your career. This is what almost happened to Roger Scruton, the famous British conservative philosopher. He wrote The Thinkers of the New Left, Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands in the 80s, during the Thatcher era, when politically it was a very, very advantageous time to be a conservative. But his publisher was forced by another professor, who also worked with that publisher, to stop selling his books in stores. He was lanced and attacked in the British press, and he, in his career as a university professor, was basically all over, as Scruton himself has said, when talking about fools, frauds, and firebrands. Now, he's dead, unfortunately, God rest his soul, but this happened to him, and there are plenty of academics who undergo certain kinds of unfortunate actions at the hands of their peers. Dr. West, you were not dealing with manifestations of simply anti-Palestinian sentiment or Jim Crow. You were dealing with a system which is not built upon veritas, not built upon knowledge. It uses those two things as a means to convince people that it is virtuous. You are dealing with a system that is built upon the progression of certain people who hold the key aims and desires of those who are progressing them. If someone goes through a tenure committee review, and they are affable and likable to the faculty at large, they will put them in. Just because you have eccentric views does not mean you're going to be denied. There are plenty of professors who have eccentric views about the world who have tenure. So, West, your eccentric views, which are not really that eccentric in my opinion, I think they're wrong, but not eccentric, have nothing to do with why you were denied tenure. We have to stop interpreting phenomenon that can be objectively and empirically verifiable as not being bound to a particular ideological prism or cause as being bound to a particular ideological prism or cause, because we miss the forest for the trees. We miss the truth for our own preconceptions. And the more we are rooted in our own preconceptions, the less ability we have to actually get to a good understanding of an issue. So no. Dr. West kind of exposed what academia is all about, but he's doing it in a manner that perpetuates his opinions of systems and powers and oppressions, and that's not wise. That's not correct. What is correct is that academia is this sort of racket in which only a particular kind of person is welcomed and allowed if they're going to ever climb the ranks. You can remain an associate professor for the rest of your life or an adjunct and be all kind of weird, but you'll be susceptible to the beast and the wolves. You'll be able to be fired. But if you want to get that creme de la creme of tenure, the social affirmation and the institutional protection that comes with tenure, you have to carry water. West does not carry water for anyone but his convictions, which is why I respect him. But that is death in academia. Not carrying water for anything but your own convictions is death in an institution that prides the convictions of committees and collectives over the conscience of the individual. And Emerson said, whoso it be a man must first be an individual. Whoso it be a man must first be a nonconformist. Capture that spirit of nonconformity and perhaps take it to a place where it won't be squelched, like maybe not academia. Think about it, my friends. I love you guys so much. If you love me, patreon.com/PhilCWatson, PayPal, PhilCWatson@gmail.com, or you can get me on Discord, which is going to be linked down below, or you can get me on Locals, ChristianWatson@Locals.com. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.